Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the Short Film Contest 2016 for the second time in a row, it's Lanaya is Mine by Max of S2D. Give it up!
Hello and welcome to my behind the scenes video on my Dota 2 International 2016 Short Film Contest entry, Lanaya is Mine, which coincidentally won first place. And man, like, it's really hard to know where to begin, but I mean, I might as well, it's just, I was not expecting to get first place at all, and I am incredibly humbled and thankful and grateful for your support, and it means so much to me. And I thought I was gonna get third, you know? Maybe second if I got really lucky, because there were so many incredible entries this year. And at the same time, like, it's kind of a shame that there are only 10 winners, but I'm gonna get my soapbox for Valve later. In a couple minutes, actually. But anyway, so much like last year, I'm gonna make, I'm making a video that explains some stuff about the movie. This year I will talk less about technical stuff because that's kind of the beaten path already. Source Filmmaker 2, I covered all the bases, the differences, the little tips and tricks last year already. This year I really want to stress the importance of fitting your scenario in 60 seconds, because I noticed that's something a lot of entries struggle with, and I want to share as many tips and thoughts as I can to help people make even better short films in Source Filmmaker, or live action or whatever. I really want to see more cool Dota short films, because it is a really cool and deep universe, even though some people may only care about the game. But there is a really cool universe behind it, and I really think it deserves to be explored. And there is so much untapped potential behind it. And I really want to help people make better short films, or just films at all, based on Dota, really, and in Source Filmmaker. But anyway, you get the point. First, I'm gonna get on my soapbox and broadcast my thoughts about how the short film contest was handled this year, in the hopes that maybe somebody at Valve will be watching this video and maybe they might relay the feedback to the Dota team or whoever was handling the short film contest this year. Well, last year there were 5 winners, and each of those winners got $20,000. So no particular order of winners, if there's no first place, second place. Everybody was on equal footing, with a total prize pool of $100,000. This year, there's 10 winners, and the first place gets 25k, the second place gets 10k, the third place gets 5k, and everybody else gets a measly 500. And when you know how many good entries there were this year, and how amazing some of them were, 500 just seems inadequate, completely inadequate, and only 10 winners, it's not enough, in my opinion. I think 15 would be a really good starting point, because then you would have as many finalists as the cosplay contest, of which the first edition happened at TI6 this year. But maybe 25 winners really would be the perfect number. I mean, yeah, because then you could be airing, the top 25 in order each day, and then on Friday, like it happened this year, you would get the top 5, and it would be kind of cool, and you could make it a daily fixed occurrence throughout the broadcast of the tournament. So that's how I would handle it if I were Valve, I mean, scheduling-wise. Now, prize pool-wise, it's kind of a shame that, it's stupid that there's twice as many winners with half as much money, because on paper, that's 4 times worse. And believe me, for me, it's not about the money, because, come on, I've made cores like Faceless Rex. I don't need the money. In fact, I've given most of it away to the people who helped me make the film, and in music licensing. But as much as I don't want to spit on the gift that people have given me by voting for my entry, it's hard to not feel like I've stolen the first place from, the vision, because it's such, I was really expecting to lose to that entry, and I really don't mean to pour salt in the wound, but it's I really feel like the rewards are inadequate, and long story short, basically, I know it's very optimistic to basically say, Valve, please dedicate more time and more money to people who are making fan art of your game, but I really think it needs to happen because, man, Valve has its roots in the modding community after all, and I think it will really be, I mean, completely fitting to do something like this. And if you ask me for the price pool distribution, I would make it a lot less top heavy. Maybe something like, actually you could probably do something like 25, 20, 15, 10, and then 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then, I don't know, maybe the bottom 10 gets 500. But then, since you have so many entries and finalists, maybe the bottom 10 would actually deserve 500, you know? I mean, that's just a thought, but anyway, to sum it up, more finalists, at least 15, that's the starting point, 15, and please don't make the prize pool so top heavy. Please reward everybody with as much money as they deserve, and not just the top 3. Right, so I'm gonna get done from my soapbox now, and we're actually gonna start talking about how the movie was made. And first we have a whole 40 minutes of story discussion with Eric who helped me write the movie. And after that we'll be actually talking about the technical stuff. So now I'm with my friend Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Eric, well, I could introduce him, but that's kind of boring. So Eric, tell us about yourself.
Hello, my name is Eric Wright. But you probably know... Actually, wait, no, you'll know me as Eric Wright. That's my name with my YouTube channel and all that. I make funny internet videos on the internet. There's a YouTube link, I'm assuming, that's going to appear right now. Click on it. They're Dota videos. I make all random. I make guides called The Only Way to Play. Maybe you've seen them. I've made some good videos. I've made like 2 or 3. I've also made many more videos.
Right. So Eric makes really funny videos, and he's really good at coming up with funny ideas, unlike myself. And I'm basically going to be talking about the story with him. So the thing is, with ideas, they are paradoxically, simultaneously worthless and yet everything, at least when it comes to doing stuff for a 60-second film. Ideas are worthless because everybody can come up with an amazing idea, but execution is everything, and it's just really weird. And one thing me and Eric noticed when we were looking at competitors is that I really don't mean to trash talk. Like, it's really coming from a good place, because believe me, I want to see really cool videos. I want to see more good Dota SFMs. And one thing we noticed that people don't know how to do is fit their idea within 60 seconds. You have to trim down things, you have to condense things. And me and Eric found out the hard way.
What we have going for us in the final version sort of came after a good 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but we had a few drafts that were absolutely over the limit by like minutes, actual minutes.
Yeah, an actual minute, that's true.
We're going to talk about how we got to 60 seconds. You'll notice a lot of the time the jokes that are happening in the short film now bounce off of each other in a really, really natural way that is pretty much the only way that we could manage to get it into 60 seconds.
Yeah, the art of getting everything into 6 seconds is that you have to condense jokes into like you have like 3 things. You have to like make them all happen in a single shot, or you have to find a way to integrate one of them into another. It's just really weird. It's not a science, it's an art, or so to speak.
We'll get into more of that a little later on with like actual specifics. There are specifically a few jokes that I want to point out, but we'll get to them in a bit.
For instance, in the first place, we thought that the beginning shot where Sven is chasing Templar Assassin is gonna last 10 seconds. No, like in the final version, it's like 3.5 plus 3 seconds, so 6.5 seconds. And it's actually like all kind of weird because like the timing also had to be detected by the music. I'll get more into the music later, like that's another subject entirely. And I said all of this last year, right? This really like cuts into things I said last year again, but like I really want to stress it even more this year. because I mean, all the technical stuff, it was more of a discovery last year, but now like it's really about how the hell do you condense as many ideas and things as you can into 60 seconds.
Especially considering this was a complex set of jokes that had to be set up and paid off in enough time to make them funny, but also like, you know, fast enough to get them into 60 seconds. Do you want to start right off the bat with the title and what it was going to be?
Yeah. Okay, so the title, it's all you.
Why are you
Eric.
laughing? Why are you laughing? This title.
Okay,
is
so I'm laughing
gold.
because the title you pressured me for, and it's actually completely true. I'm not even kidding. This is not something we're making up. Eric wanted me to title the film An Adventure. It was the most terrible pun ever. And then when I said no, he came up with an even more terrible pun. Lanaya is mine. Because, you know, she's mine, I'm going to get her. That's why there's the bounty poster at the beginning. But she's mine. She's actually mine. Attack is mine.
The original draft, we did not have the poster. The poster, which is the thing that kicks off everything, is actually one of the last things that we wrote in, specifically to reference the title for the bounty.
Yeah. It actually came midway because like yesterday I was doing like a rerender of every single day, and the poster came in halfway. It was like June 16 or 17, I can't remember, but yeah, it came in halfway. Because like I think the story was pretty much, I mean, 95% set in stone halfway through the actual production.
The intro was just so long that we needed to sum it up in a really quick way.
Yeah. Also because once again because of I need like the music had a fixed duration and I can't change that, and the start of the music needs to happen at a certain time, like 15 seconds, and it needs to end at 57 seconds when it goes like dun, dun, boom, and then at the last boom, that's when the Texans are revealed, and another beat later, because it's nicer if it's in beat, there's a Texas explosion. So fixed duration for the music. And because of that, the intro needs to be trimmed down to a very specific time. So we had to find a way to like really narratively make it flow better.
Originally, we were calling it Juked.
Juked. Yeah, Juked was my like, if I can find of any title ever, that's what I'm gonna use.
It was pretty much the working title that we used because we came up with the scripts so long before we actually came up with an actual title to call it, which meant that we were going into it hoping for some divine inspiration with a title later on.
You found it.
Anyone's. I wouldn't really call that divine inspiration. It came from somewhere, but not from a good place.
Right. It's also really hard to say who came up with what because it was such a back and forth process. I mean, you and I, like, we just sat in a Skype call, like, almost every day of working on the movie. We're like, all day long, we're like sitting in a Skype call because you were working on your own entry too. And we just like, hey, what if this happened? What if I did this to make it work better? And it's just very back and forth process. So everything is really shared story wise.
Max and I both woke up, ate breakfast, got onto Skype, shared screens, and then pretty much did that until we couldn't do it anymore and fell asleep. And we did that for a week and a bit, 2 weeks, 2.5.
Yeah, right.
It was a long time. It was
12 days. I mean, I worked on my week for 12 days, and I think you started like a couple days after I did. Like your movie was made in even a shorter time than I did. But anyway, so you know what? Let's read the initial script that we did. Like we did that outline on the first day, I believe, over Steam.
Before that,
so first,
do you want to talk about the ideas that got us to our idea that we have now? Because we started off with a crazy, like a veritable cornucopia of insane ideas that we got from literally just looking at the Dota Heroes splash screen.
I can't remember them, but maybe you do.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell the story then. So the exact first thing that we did was Max and I decided on this. We got ready. We got onto a call. We had no ideas right off the bat. I had a few ideas from last year that I didn't get around to doing, and I pitched those. Max had a few ideas, he pitched them to me. And then we sat there not really being okay with the ideas that we were coming up with because they mostly were just either punchlines with no actual story or story with no actual end, which is pretty much true of all of them, right? Most of the, like, I think I have a few of them, and we sat there looking at the Dota 2 Heroes webpage. It's literally dota2.com/heroes, where it has every single hero just there, and we're looking at the pictures, we're going through them all and going, what if that did that with X and Y?
I remember one I came up with. It was like a rivalry between Sven and Juggernaut. I mean, it's also it's already kind of canon game. It was like, Sven, can't you see how mad I am? And it's like, no, and he just like Sven just draws. I mean, sorry, Juggernaut just draws angry eyebrows onto his mask. It's like, you know, this little scene, like just very like 5-second ideas that I get in my head that are like based off of like existing Dota lore. It's like, can I find out the way to like flesh that out into a bigger concept? Or like that's like the one that like I remember the most for some reason. But yeah,
I remember that one too. We also had you immediately coming up with, I can do a Sven voice. Can we have Sven in the?
Oh yeah.
Because Max is very, very proud of his Sven voice. He's very, very proud of many of the voices in Dota that he can do. He can do Naga Siren. He can do Enigma. He won a bit of money from doing Enigma, I think, a year or two ago. So right off the bat, we had a confirmed voice actor, which is a really, really powerful tool in making these short films, because voice acting is very, very hard to come by, especially within a week, and especially for specifically Dota characters that have nuances and all that. You'd have to have a voice actor who's also sort of a Dota player. A few of the original ideas that we had, I remember a few of mine because I have them written down. We were these are just literally one-line jokes, and we take that one line and we go with it. I have heroes decide to rebel against the players because the players are arguing over top, and the heroes are friendly with each other, and they're like,
I remember that one. Yeah,
I really like that. And it was going to be like an animator versus animation sort of pastiche.
But we only had to like remember that at this point, like it was 2 weeks before the deadline. I actually have a really nasty habit of participating to like every single Valve movie contest I participated in. It started like 2 weeks before the deadline, except the Wishmaker, my first one. It was 4 days actually, 3 days and a half, whatever. But yeah, so gotta find an idea that fits all the criteria for being a good idea, but that you can also do in 2 weeks with the means that you have at your disposal, which is to say one animator, a bit of a motion capture suit, and the voice actors you have, and whatever.
And that was a massive thing with a lot of the entries, and a lot of the ideas that we had. They were so crazy ambitious. They were going to be crazy fight scenes. They were going to be crazy special effects and all that. And a lot of ideas had to be cut right off the bat because 2 weeks, 2 animators, 1.5 animators. I was off doing other stuff. So ultimately, we ended up with this 50,
I think the craziest idea you had was like a live action one, something that was going to be partial live action.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we want to say it out loud because that's something we might want to do next year. But then again, I told you, ideas are worthless and it doesn't matter because it's all in execution. So I'm going to tell it anyway. It's about like bristleback and tusk in a bar, but you don't find that out until the end. So like, and basically people are like, oh, what? So you just sneezed on him? That doesn't make sense, right? I guess in a way, it's basically just, the joke just relies on Dota skills. Very bit silly, basically. That's basically the joke. Like, you gotta look at your idea and find what it abstracts onto at the base level. So yeah.
And I mean, that joke, that is the joke. I can say the joke right now, and that's not 60 seconds. I can say...
When you think about it, like, there was the live action entry. The shopkeeper one was like, the shopkeeper calls 2 interns. And it's like, the interns. And it's like, you just Google it. I mean, YouTube, search it on YouTube. It's really good. I really loved it. But if you don't want to watch it for whatever reason, basically the shopkeeper like calls interns. It's like, there's gonna be a hero coming in. He's called Axe, and you need to sell him this axe. But wait, what is it to sell an axe? Oh, but it might also need the axe that turns you into 3 axes. The meta style. But whatever, it's really good. You should watch it.
Exactly. But that was an idea of things in Dota don't make sense, and that was a completely different idea to the ones that we had, which is the exact same joke. the same joke gets us in two different directions because of execution. We didn't do that one, but if we had done it, it would be the same joke, but be a completely different tone and style to the interns.
Yeah. So what other really weird ideas did we get?
We had a new hero. I remember that one. We had like
the CSGO crossover. Yeah, I remember that.
We were going to do a crossover. That was, well, we weren't going to do it. That was one idea that I think we sat on for about 10 seconds. I had a few of my own, which is like the final 58 seconds of a 5-hour game, and it would be a 24 style countdown with like TikTok.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, this game ends when this timer hits, but there's absolutely no way to happen, and it unravels like, how does the game finish? That was an idea, but that would be a really stylistic short film to make that we didn't really have time or the energy to really craft, because it is a bunch of things happening in time, in sync with a bunch of other things happening, and every single thing is a chain of events that causes the end.
Yeah.
That sort of thing takes a bit of time.
And the thing with a 60-second short film is that you need to make everything super clear to the audience right off the bat. Like I remember, like I said this like about like 20 times in the last behind the scenes video last year, that you need to make the joke super clear. But at the same time, without like making it obvious, like you don't want to explain a joke, because like explaining a joke makes it unfunny. You just want to make it really obvious and readable and understandable. Like just make it not confusing. And you also want to avoid outside references. So like that's why the 24 idea was like bad, inherently bad, because like referencing a TV show, like you have to remember that this is the international short film contest. It's international, and for this reason, jokes that are entirely within the context of the game are going to work a lot better than references to outside stuff. If you're gonna reference something that's outside the game, it needs to be really universal, and even that like is really rare to come by. Because I remember in the poll to Dev Commentary, they said that they tried to find a really universal joke at one point, and the one that really came up was smooth jazz. You remember, like at the part was like we're gonna play smooth jazz in 3, 2, 1. Like that's the joke everybody throughout all cultures found funny. But like that's basically the only one they found. So yeah.
And Max right here is bringing up a massive point that I completely forgot about until this exact point, that crafted a lot of the ideas that went into Lanaya is Mine. There is very, very little dialogue, because dialogue is inherently it separates cultures and all that, because it would be completely in English. We try to avoid that. We tried to have as little dialogue as possible. So
if you write a dialogue in English to simple words, simple sentences, because not everybody has a good grasp of English, and that's fine. That's just how it works.
Exactly.
And the thing is, it doesn't really matter, because like the judging happens on Steam. This year it happened on Steam, and I made sure that I added subtitles in like all the big languages that the Dota community needs, like Russian, Spanish. There was also like Turkish, Malaysian, Southeast Asian stuff, but when it gets broadcasted on the air, it's nice. There's no subtitles. Valve has not included subtitles, so it's nice to stick to simple English words and not make the joke rely on the dialogue. So the dialogue is here to supplement the thing. It's not here as the butt of the joke.
Yeah, it's a little bit of flavor and all that. I remember one line, which is, by the Shattered Helm, does nobody have money for Sentry Wards? Really, really simple. The only actual bit of like complex writing there is Shattered Helm, which is a complete and direct reference to a line that everybody would hear like 1,000 times in just a typical Sven game. So that line was good. We had Sentry Ward, which everybody understands. We have Shattered Helm, and we have everything else really simple between those two things.
Yeah, and to you, if you're watching right now, you're like, man, they're really overthinking the dialogue. No, we're not. You really gotta overthink so many things to get it right. It's really part of the process. Like when you're working in a creative field, you really need to overthink. So yeah, it's really part of the normal process. Now I'm gonna read the initial script, the outline we wrote on the first day. So first, Sven and Temple Assassin chase. Sven turns around the corner, sees nothing, walks forward, bumps into nothing. Then there's a thought bubble about how TA can use meld. Sven then calls over the team, and one team member warns about how they need to get back to farming. The whole team then uses their skill on the part where they think TA is there, and Sven's like, oh, I can't believe nobody has dust of appearance. Sven says, Crystal Maiden says, hey, I do, and Sven's like, what? You know, like, what? As in, why didn't she use it sooner? CM uses the dust. Nothing appears. Except there's a rekey behind CM. It was like about to backstab her. Like that's just a background joke. But like then it just like goes away. But like everybody's like turned towards the spot where TA is there, so they don't see Ricky. Like that's just an additional joke. But anyway, Sven then kicks like the air where like they still think Templar Assassin's supposed to be. There's a clink. Like she's here somehow. Like please bring something better. Bring sentry wards. Then there's a shot of the crew flying towards them. Then Crystal Maiden grabs the sentries. Sven readies his sword to hit her, all angry, looking like, no, he just like, he actually uses his ult, you know, he turns red. Then there's the sound of the sentry being planted, and then there's a visible stance shift in Sven's pose, and he turns back into blue immediately, like, oh shit, and then the camera pulls away, and it's to take his minds, and then boom. And all of that would actually fit about probably 100 seconds of footage if you really condensed it. Without actually cutting all of these ideas.
That was a 3-hour epic odyssey right there. And that was the initial script. We added things to that for more jokes because we're like, we got plenty of time.
But we did that in a way that allowed us to like condense things. So what was cut? The dust part, I'm really sad about that. The dust part, I really wish I could have had that because it would have been pretty funny, but then Sven using his ult at the end too. There's also like a lot of, I don't have them in that text document and I forgot a lot of them. Okay, so we're cutting up the dust completely, but how do we make the sentry part funny? And it's like, nobody has money for it. Why do they have no money? Because they all have shiny items. And you're like, Crystal Maiden is like, oh yeah, but I have the Arcane address, right? Okay, so I actually gave her that loadout because it's my favorite loadout, and I think the default CM is stupidly designed. I mean, she's a nice princess, why is she half naked? So like the loadout I gave her, in my opinion, is the best thing you can have on her. But whatever, that's just a tangent. Anyway, so yeah, she has the Arcane address, so no money. Scaraf has like the golden emeralds, so no money. Queen of Pain has like, what does she have? I don't know, like 20 golden cores, so no money. And what does Pudge have? The dragon claw hooks.
Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that stayed. The dragon claw hooks.
That's the only thing that stayed. Concise. A huge pile of dragon claw hooks. Because like it didn't really make sense. I mean, it felt like there was no way to really convey that the others were like floating in golden items. It was way too over-nosed. And then why didn't they have them before? Whereas like if there's only one character, Pudge, that has all these expensive items, it's a lot easier to like accept it as being a cartoony joke.
The whole characters being rich thing was not, we didn't come up with that just naturally. It formed by the fact that you wanted the Arcana CM, and I was like, why would she be an Arcana CM?
Yeah, I remember that.
The joke formed by the fact that the Arcana version of Crystal Maiden was already animated at this point, and we're like, what if she is in this state because she spent all her money and therefore she wouldn't have the ability to buy wards?
Yeah. And then I was, and even after that, I was like, okay, so CM buys the sentry anyway somehow, but since like Pudge was the last character going from right to left, it didn't make sense. So Sven buys it because he's the only one with gold. But like, carries aren't supposed to do that. I mean, 5k players will tell you otherwise. Eric is a 5k player. The fact that Sven buys it is like, it's a more subtle joke you could say, because like, carries don't buy sentries usually, whatever. Mm-hmm. So like, it just adds insult to injury.
And immediately after that, we followed up with a shot of the sentries and the coins being swapped. In fact, the sentries, they don't show them being given. We just show the coins being handed, and you can
it's too complicated to animate.
Yeah, you can infer that sentries are being given because of that.
Yeah.
Everything is concise. We had the potential to animate both of those things happening, but they would have added a few milliseconds that we could not. We absolutely could not work with. And then we get to a shot where Sven is now holding sentries, talking, and readying his sword. Now, he does 3 things at the exact same time, specifically to cut out more time. He places the sentry, looks away to talk, readies his sword, and then turns around right into the pose that he's doing now that the sentry is down there. All of this is pretty much a simplified version of God's strength that he uses, and then comes down from it and all that. Yeah. And he drops his sword.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Originally, I motion captured the picking the sword, and then I realized, if it was planted into the ground, and he reaches for the sword, but then he notices, no, fuck it, whatever. There's no point. I was pretty happy with that idea. I think it really works well.
Hey Max,
man, I'm actually kind of sad that I didn't think of filming the motion capture footage.
Max, I want to bring up something that I completely forgot to mention. When you were doing the mocap and you were sharing screen, and I could see you doing the mocap and all that, I filmed.
Oh god, I see where this is going.
I filmed a lot of it. I would like okay, I'm gonna give you the footage. If it's not too embarrassing, would you mind showing the good people out
I will. That's actually nice, thank you. I mean, it doesn't matter because I don't care about looking silly in the mocap, so it's fine.
It's interesting
I will.
Stuff
thank you.
If you just sort of forget the fact that Sven is animated by this French man just running around in his room.
Yeah. Much like last year, this year my entry featured techies. This time more as a general plotline, you could say, than just a one-off gag. And the problem in a way is that this year I'm not the only entry that went with techies, in the spotlight. And although, in a way, you could almost argue that my entry could be the only one that actually did it well instead of being a cop-out. Because other entries, there's a few other entries that I saw that just were I don't know how to end my entry, so I'm just gonna put techies and everything explodes.
It's the typical...
And that's just a cop-out, yeah, that's just a cop-out. But
it was all a dream, whereas your one it was exactly. Part of the plot. Yeah.
That's basically the equivalent of it was only a dream in Dota style. Although, but mine was it was building up to that moment, so but the thing is, you could say to the general public, it doesn't really matter because, they just see techies, and techies is this one general categories of the gag. And even though I don't think, I think mine almost had the best implementation of techies as a plot device, it's still techies. And next year, I will want to not use techies. Definitely, the goal next year is to not use techies at all. Because, techies, being the de facto cloney hero of the game means that it's basically the easy joke to make. Very easy joke to make, so... Yeah, I will want to avoid them in the future.
Yeah,
because they can come off as being cheap, even no matter how well you integrate them within your story.
On that point, there's actually a lot of really recurring themes throughout a lot of the short films. Pinging was another one. What's your opinion on pinging? Because pinging is a joke in and of itself. Just the concept of pinging.
Yeah.
You had it in your video. You had it in the video that we did. So, why?
Well, for me, pinging was okay, Sven needs to call the team over, but how to make that funny? And just repeated pinging, Mm-hmm. At first, pinging, and then you play with the contrast, and then it just spams ping like a 2K Russian player or whatever. But the thing with pinging is actually so universal, everybody's lived through it, and it's not really obnoxious because it's again mechanic that it doesn't have that same feeling of it's an overused plot device as techies. So I think it's fine. But the thing is, 60 seconds is so short that I wouldn't be surprised if basically you had a lot of the same jokes next year as there was this year. it's just gonna take so much originality to come up with original gags that don't repeat themselves.
Do you mind?
Like everything's so short.
If I jump in with a bit of conspiracy theory here. Now, original jokes have to be set up before they get to be paid off because they're original jokes, right? So pinging is a really, really fast way of getting a joke out there that keeps the plot moving along. Because pinging doesn't have to be set up. Pinging, the sound, just the sound and the effect.
It
happens.
Yeah,
it's probably one of the fastest jokes that you can do.
It is ingrained into every player's mind.
Yeah.
It's a Pavlovian reaction.
And same thing with techies. I mean, if you really want, because I mean, just the idea of just hearing the sound is every single one of the entries, nearly every single one of the top 10 had bipedal characters that were easily animatable and had big faces. Do you think if someone had made a Broodmother video and tried to pass that off as like an actual comedy where Broodmother is expressing and all that, it wouldn't really be as well received because she's got a face that's not really appealing?
It would be a lot harder to make, and you would be restricted to certain categories of humor, I guess.
Exactly.
But you're forgetting one thing.
Which is that?
Sven.
What is that? And Sven does not have a face. So how did we tackle that?
So the reason Sven didn't have a face actually is a bit of a technical one. Is that, not really, because like we said that the primary motivation for Sven is that I could do the voice. But the other side benefit of having Sven is that, one, I can upgrade the model without breaking stuff, and I'm gonna talk about that a bit later.
Oh yeah, because
the second reason is that no face animation. So you get to do everything about the language, and you don't have to mess with facial animation.
No lip syncing, Max. What an amazing hero Sven is.
It doesn't really matter because like lip syncing is easy, really. But like the other reason like not having facial animation is good is because Dota models, they're pretty bad. I mean, they're pretty bad for close-ups and such.
Do you want
the one? I mean, it's not even really about the texture resolution. It's more about the polygon count, and especially the eyes. The eyes are the window to a soul.
Do you want
and the eyebrows, really?
Are you about to talk about the fact that the eyes aren't actually eyes? They're just sort of painted on bits of skin. And when you look left and right, it's actually just the skin moving left and right instead of the eyeball turning.
Yeah,
I'd
because
like to
they
talk
don't have
about
eyeballs.
That. I'd like to talk about that a lot.
Go ahead.
This is something that it's probably the hardest thing to cope with as an animator and source filmmaker with the Dota characters. They can't look left and right at all, because if you're doing a close-up and they're looking left and right, their eyes don't really turn. They don't really pivot in their sockets.
Actually, for some heroes, it's actually fine. I mean, you will like you yourself, you notice as you squish the controls around that it's terrible. But one thing that I've definitely noticed watching a lot of other entries is that it's actually fine. It's actually not that bad in most heroes, as long as you like take care of like doing the motion just within acceptable bounds. It just really isn't that bad. But with some heroes, the eyes barely move left and right. So it's not really about the fact that it looks bad, it's that you don't have freedom, you don't have the range of motion needed to actually express something. Crystal Maiden's eyes on her Arcana model have that issue. And a bunch of other heroes do.
How many close-ups did you have in this film? Zero. You had zero.
More or less. I mean, like there's close-ups and there's close-up where all you see is the face. But I think I only ever stopped at mid-chest to shoulders high.
Yeah, mid-chest.
So
like, because if you go any closer,
instead of like really zooming on the face, I could have actually zoomed in on the Zen helmet because once again I upgraded the model, but there wasn't like much point to doing that.
Exactly. We needed to establish right off the bat that Lanaya was being chased by Sven because in the original thing, it could be read that they were, chasing.
Teammates. Yeah.
They were both chasing something else.
Yeah.
So you added in her looking back and a bit of sound of anguish.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, at first the looking back was already from the ground up, but like I felt like it might not be clear enough. I remember like at first the camera wasn't shaking up, but like making the camera a lot shakier, like it really gives more of the chase vibe. And like she turns back and we look, and there's the huh sound like in disdain, and in a way like it almost like says, oh yeah, I'm about to like juke the hell out of you, buddy. But yeah, but the wanted poster, which also Alexandra Kern did, she drew Lanaya's head on it. Like, I mean, it's a kind of a shame because you only have 1 second to read it, and I guess the only thing you really can read if you don't pause the video is that you just see wanted, and hopefully you have enough time for your eyeballs to pick up the fact that it's Templar Assassin's portrait on here. Actually, fun fact, if you, that wanted poster comes from somewhere else, and I will tell you because I want people to actually see this. It comes from the very first Dota comic, Are We Heroes Yet? And it's actually the same layout. It's changed, of course, but like it's very similar layout. So like, I really like to have like those little throwbacks to lore and the bigger world outside of just like Dota matches, because like it's just like the lore of Dota is really sparse and stuff like that, but.
Oh, you've brought up.
I feel like for many people, like lore, just like little story details, story bits and pieces. Like to me, it really enhances the enjoyment of a game. Just imagine if Dota was just like the same game, except you didn't have any story details and all the heroes were a lot more generic. Sure, you would have all the the same same heroes, same gameplay mechanics, but like I feel like it would be a much more boring game if you like. All the heroes are like mute and like very generic designs or whatever. Like the atmosphere of a game, in my opinion, is something extremely valuable, and that's also why I strive to recreate a really nice like atmosphere in my movies as well. I really want to give like this sense of bigger scale, this sort of like integration into like a story in a way. Like I really like to just like play with the sense of scale. Just make it feel like the movie is not like a standalone piece. It's like, it's really hard to explain my feelings about this, man. It's hard to say it into words, but I really hope you will see what I mean. Yeah. We forgot to say earlier, like about the shopkeeper and Pudge being there. Like, so Pudge is buying all these dragonfly hooks, and that's why he has no money for the Century Watch, right? Like the way, I think this is like a really good example of. Like, this is the prime example of condensing a joke or several jokes into one. Like, okay, so you go from right to left, all okay, we're saying, no, I don't have money for Sentry Wards, and that Pudge is there. Okay, so we needed, a way for them to buy the Sentry Wards, right? But, like, if Pudge is buying the Dragonfly hooks, okay, the shopkeeper needs to be there. So then we don't have to waste time on actually like calling the courier because the shopkeeper just happens to be there because I don't know, like there doesn't need to be a reason why the shopkeeper is there. I mean, not explicitly stated, that is. It doesn't need to be a reason that's stated in your face. Like, why the shopkeeper there? I don't know, because Pudge called him, I guess. Or maybe if this specific part of outside the Dota map happens to be like where the shopkeeper is. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we managed to, like, by condensing those jokes, we segued into the shopkeeper just being there, and there you have the source for the Sentry Wards.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, yeah, far out, Max. That was going to be dust, and then a courier, going all the way from the fountain all the way to where they are. I really like the fact that the shopkeeper's just there. I find that really, really funny. Because, like, clearly, he's not in the Dota map. He's just, like, when he's not in a Dota game, what else would he do? He's a traveling salesman. He'd sell things to travelers.
Yeah.
So he just happened to be there. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But does that mean the shopkeeper died too? Did the shopkeeper die at the end? Well,
he's not there in the last shot, so he's just probably scurried away. I mean, I feel like it's kind of implied that the shopkeeper is, like, not a normal person. I mean, he definitely has some powers of some kind, like...
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, you just read the comic, Are We Heroes Yet? And it's definitely implied that, like, there's definitely a lot of magic at play. Not regular magic either.
Do you think he's actually Ice Frog?
It could be a graphical representation of Ice Frog in a way.
Because he's always there.
I kind of feel like it's implied that it's sort of like a demigod or something like that.
Mm-hmm. But the shopkeeper's there with a bunch of items. He also just happens to be stocking sentries on the strip.
You know what I should have had next to him? His pet, the
Greevil?
The rhinoceros-looking creature.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I only just remember, like, at the time I remember actually thinking that, but at the time I didn't remember that it was actually a TI2 courier. It was a TI1, 2, or 3 courier.
Right.
They actually made the creator into a courier,
Yeah. Really.
which is nice. Lore. Guys, I hope, like, really, like, all this story discussion, if you've managed to watch, like so far we've shot an hour worth of footage. I don't know if I'm gonna condense it down to, like, 40 minutes or whatever, but anyway, if you watch it through, I really hope, like, hearing about our story process and thoughts, like, it's been helpful to you. And I really want to see basically stories in Dota SFMs that, like, just flow better. And I really hope, like, it's a valuable resource, everything we've just said. And, just I really hope it's been valuable. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I like being able to do this because it's a lot about discipline and understanding that some jokes aren't quite funny. They're more just referring to other things that are funny, and it's just a thing that you just need to practice with.
Yeah, and there's just like every little thing you put in your movie has, like, you could say implications, and it can call back into another thing, can call back to another thing. Like everything is interconnected. That's my point.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna move into the technical side of things. One thing you may have noticed is that Sven's model is not the same as usual. Its textures are using the original workshop art sources, which are higher resolution by a factor of 4. I also edited those textures and made a new material so that the saturation and automatic rim lighting would not be as strong. A visual look which is desirable from the in-game top-down perspective, but looks like ass otherwise. I would have liked to have snow sticking on him after he got back up, but I didn't have the time to look into it. I could have also re-rigged him more extensively, like giving actual fingers, but I figured it was time better spent on other things. One thing that I do regret is not looking more into how to make his metal part feel a lot more metallic. I also took the opportunity of making some of the weight maps less terrible. Half of the Dota heroes suffer from rushed out one way or another, as Valve had to get a lot of heroes out of the door in a timely manner when the game was starting out. Sven is not as bad as other heroes like Templar Assassin, but there were spots which absolutely needed fixing, like his forearms. Given that it does not have a face, being able to have hand motions that deform the mesh properly is nice. The way Source 2 works makes it, as far as I'm aware, impossible to edit the game's base content. If I want to edit a model, I have to re-import it from scratch, and as you might remember from last year, some engine features are tied to Valve's internal tools, and as far as characters are concerned, the biggest of these would be facial blend shapes. They exist in the old workshop art source files, but not in a way that preserve the hierarchical rules that govern how all of these morphs interact with each other. But Sven doesn't have a face, so it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, Valve's latest workshop art source packages not only include the game-sized textures, but also omit the morphs. 2 steps backwards. Maybe it would be nice to have an ultra texture setting, much like how an ultra shadow quality was introduced. I voiced Enigma last year, and I'm doing Sven this time around. It's a much easier voice to pull off and doesn't require fancy filtering. The helmet muffling is done with EQ and convoluted reverb. Sven's original voice has an accent that's somewhere between German and vaguely Nordic. I tried my best to imitate that, and while I personally think I got the accent right, some people thought it sounded a little French, and I can't really blame them for thinking that. But what really matters is, you don't have to sound like the original performance. It's nearly impossible to reach that bar anyway. Listen to my impression and the original side by side, and it's super obvious that the two are far apart. What you gotta aim for is sounding like what people remember of the original performance. You need to sound like their memory of the voice, and as long as you meet that requirement, you're good to go. I decided to set my movie in a wintry night because I figured it had a greater chance of visually standing out like that. I had also done 2 workshop promo videos in that setting, so I was familiar with it. Snow falling is also cheap atmospheric detail that doesn't require a lot of setup. I could have probably gone with a darker night, but having it this bright is perhaps not that unnatural. After all, it's a full moon upon a mystical land, and snow does reflect light quite a bit. As we talked about earlier with Eric, I tried to make the setting feel like it wasn't in a Dota map, but some other region outside of it. Why? For originality, to explain the universe further, for the audience not to wonder, hey, are they in the Radiant Jungle or the offlane? That sort of stuff. But I'm gonna let you in on a secret. It's actually the Radiant Jungle, near the bottom tier 2 tower. It's a really good spot for movies. The limitations I talked about a year ago are still there. The ultra shadow quality setting does help, but much less than you'd think. Even though it doubles the shadow map resolution, it does not double the acceptable far Z distance, especially when the light's angle is close to the horizon. It also does not help the precision of the shadows, something you can spot a little here. And also in the opening shot to a certain degree. The camera barely moves before pulling away from the poster, or the shadow would do this. I wanted to have a more noticeable pan, but I had to tinker until the 3 or so jumps in the shadow map projection were not noticeable. I'm still using a skydome for the background, but this time there's about a dozen background cards. They were drawn by the amazing Alexandra Kern, and you should definitely go check out more of her work. She also drew the imaginary Lanaya, her portrait on the wanted poster, and Sven's map. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, especially moving pictures, so here's how it actually works. Because I can't extend the far Z clipping plane past a reasonable distance, there is some forced perspective at play. The cards have to move with the camera, some completely, some only partially. This creates the illusion of much greater distance than can normally be achieved. The cards also change from shot to shot and are not super consistent. You can notice it, feel that something is slightly off, but the visual gain is huge, so I believe it's worth it. Instead of using camera-based fog, I went entirely through volumetric lights. Volumetric lights can only be additive though, but it doesn't matter that much. Just a little bit of ground fog makes a big difference and really seals the deal on winter. If there is a way for camera-based fog to not affect certain models and materials, I don't know about it. And that kind of fog would affect the skydome, and that would be awful because the light from the stars is already way weaker than it should be, partially caused by the lack of EDJE once again. This is a lot more acceptable in daytime scenes if you plan your dome's texture ahead. In order to gain a huge amount of time, I set out to have a lot of flexibility with my cards. I rigged them to have a control that could stretch or squash them vertically, as well as curve them in any direction I wish. That curve control can be used to warp the middle of the card towards the side, which is really useful to balance the background composition more nicely. The torch is made using 4 lights, sometimes more if I want to fake a nicer angle on characters. It's got a bit of noise on position and intensity to make it feel more alive. It's also the only other source of lighting and a really good frame of reference, which is definitely one of the stronger points of the film as far as scene layout goes. Because of all the perspective trickery, moving the camera around was inherently discouraging. So in the majority of the shots, the camera's position does not change and it only rotates. This definitely makes the film feel less dynamic, but it made other things easier. It made using fill lights a lot easier, and I've got a lot of those because I didn't want some parts to look almost like crushed blacks before I even started doing the color grading. I think this shot has some of the nicer fill lights, but they're present throughout every single shot. There are 2 songs in the film. The first one is from the TI-5 music pack by Jeremy and Julian Soule. That was the easy part. I had no idea what to do for the rest. I looked through some stock music libraries, but there was nothing that could even remotely qualify. I resorted to looking through my personal music library, and the magic of shuffle mode made me end up with Pentimento by Kettle and Secede from their album When Can, released in 2012. It's one of my favorite albums ever, and I really recommend you check it out. Thankfully, they allowed me to license the song, and though it was a bit costly, it was such a natural fit that I don't think a custom tailored song would have been any better, especially given the small time frame that a composer would have had to make one. I had to adjust the timing of shots so that the music would sync up nicely, both in rhythm and intensity. To demonstrate, allow me to play the film with everything muted besides the music. The tricky part is that Penimento lasts a fixed duration from the point where it starts to a dun 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 part, about 43 seconds, so everything before that had to be shortened to 12 seconds when it was originally 16, because the final shot with the explosion needs time. At 30 seconds, the song also increases in intensity when everyone is using their ults. This is the part where I cut into the song and fade to a later part. The explosion happens in rhythm too. All of this was a careful act of balancing each shot so that it could play out with the necessary time, while being able to time everything against the music. I'm so glad the music ended up fitting so nicely on all aspects: rhythm, atmosphere, instrumentation and mood. If you didn't know better, you could almost think it was made for this film. Now I'm gonna go through each shot and comment on the more general things that I didn't touch on in the previous sections. I'll also tell you what I would have done differently, thanks to the power of 2020 hindsight and nitpicking. Here, I would have liked to go with a higher resolution tree, but I can't modify the base assets. Other than that, I don't have much to say about the first two shots. This streamlight on the trees is really exaggerated, yet just feels supernatural. And with the torchlight coming from the right, it gives a lot of depth to the trunks. I feel like I could have probably made the camera turn towards the torch faster here. In this shot, the parallax is really cool, but it could have been even better. A couple of the cards needed to move a tad faster. This one, I messed up the color grading a little, but that's not too bad. I'm not happy with how the stumble looks. It's not a very good animation, but it meets the baseline level of believability, so whatever. I'm super happy about how the imaginary Lanaya came out though. Not only is the animated drawing perfect at conveying it, but the way it fades in sort of feels like how a refraction ability would look. This is actually some stock After Effects simulated effect thing, with some parameters driven way up. The colors in this shot really annoy me. I talked about this last year. The way Dota's hero share works is weird, there's no proper over-brightening, etc. And this is one of the worst instances. You could not guess the fire's orange light is shining on Sven's back. It just looks blue. It's terrible. You can see it showing on the map and a tiny bit in the specular, but this is visually one of the weaker shots. I was also debating having Sven say "damn" when he turned his head, but both Eric and I thought it was funnier without it, and the intent is clear regardless. Fun fact, in this shot, Crystal Maiden is rendered entirely separately, the old-fashioned way, and chroma keyed in. Why? The procedural clothing animation. Like a few other things, and by a few other things I mostly mean particles, it's not properly aware of time as a source filmmaker knows it. So the longer it takes to render a frame, the weirder things get. And sort of disabling the system and animating the clothing bits yourself, the best workaround is to just reduce the time it takes to render a frame. So she's just rendered separately, and with much fewer progressive refinement samples. You can tell, the shadow filtering is noisy, the motion blur isn't smooth, and she's got a bit of a green outline here and there. And even though the workaround doesn't fully make the clothing behave like it really should, it's still a massive improvement over it completely spazzing out, being stiff as hell, or taking a few hours to reanimate. The overhead shot. I wanted to make it clear where Sven was pointing, at the ground. My edit of the map also has the snow missing at that spot. Could have been more exciting or dynamic though. Not much to say about the old shots. I'm really happy that people have noticed the little details. CM covering her nose when Pod is rotting, everybody holding their ears when Queen of Pain is screaming, and Sven CM being the OTP. Another fun fact. The Mystic Flare doesn't fade out gracefully, it just completely vanishes out of existence in a frame. This is why this light keeps up a bit into the next shot then fades out. Oh man, I forgot to make him grip his staff better. Having CM interact with Skyrock directly was tricky animation-wise, and I had a hard time making it look natural. It could still look better, obviously, but as I've said before, sometimes you just gotta accept it's good enough and move on. Chasing perfection is a bad habit. Anyway, there's something you might have noticed by now, the use of item sets. I picked the ones that really enhanced the visuals and pushed the characters further. With the exception of Sven, because to me it feels like default Sven is really good. Anyway, that's why Crystal Maiden has her Arcana dress and more armor, not only because it makes sense for a nice lady, but because it sort of links her with Sven. Skyroth Mage wears the red Manticore set, so he looks nicer against the predominantly blue environment. And it's also a really good set no matter what. Queen of Pain wears what I think is the most badass set for her, and Pudge is default too because, like Sven, his default appearance feels a lot more iconic than any of his sets. The pile of Dragonclaw hooks was simulated in 3ds Max by just dropping a ton of them inside a tube, with some manual editing after that. With more time, I would have liked to make it collapse after Pudge turns around or having some of the hooks fall out. I should have probably had Sven only reach for the sentries once he had said his line, because the deformation looks pretty awful. I hadn't accounted for that ahead of time. If you recall my conversation with Eric, at first I was gonna have CM plant the sentries while Sven went berserk with God's strength, only for him to instantly turn back blue in an oh shit way. After we figured out an equally good ending that was shorter, I immediately went to mocap it and didn't do any takes where I didn't instantly reach over my shoulder. Having another kind of motion with the right arm, you know, the I got this, reassuring kind of gesture, would have been better. The left arm is hand animated here, and to be precise, it's not the left arm that's animated, but the sword. The left hand's IK target is parented to it, and I parent the sword to a dummy control on the ground to have a proper pivot point. Then I animated that in time with Sven's body motion to make him look like his left arm was holding the sword, preventing it from falling over until he actually does let go. The Hitchcock zoom here really does convey that oh shit feeling you often get when you're about to get blown up by a stack of remote mines. And I actually didn't expect it to work so well. I'm super satisfied with it. At first, I thought I would have some time to show the landscape before the distant explosion in the last shot, but it didn't work timing-wise, so the explosion happens immediately on the shot change. I wish I could have had the trees sway back from the explosion, more reactiveness overall, but that would have easily taken up a day's worth of time. I really dig the composition and the lighting on the pillars though, so that's okay. I really think I should have made Lanaya sitting there a lot more visually obvious. This behind-the-scenes video comes to a close, and I hope it's been informative, educational, maybe even a little bit entertaining. But above all else, if you've been thinking of, creating your own stories in the Dota universe, whether it's through Source Filmmaker, or animated drawings, or live action, or I don't know what, but if you've been thinking of, creating your own fan work based on Dota, I really hope this has been encouraging you to do so, and that it's going to be like the other behind the scenes video that I've released, that it's a resource to you. And, I'm repeating myself at this point, but Dota, it's a good game. I would know because I play way too much of it, but it's also a very nice universe and so much untapped potential to create cool stories of your own within it. And once again, thank you so much for your support, because I am extremely grateful for it. It is really validating as an artist to receive so much praise for your work. And despite that, I don't want you to forget that this is not all about me. Far from that, and I want you, please go support artists that are making that sort of stuff. Not just me, other artists, whether they're big or small. In fact, especially small, because you gotta encourage people that are just starting, and you gotta try to give them tools to grow, to get better, and in a way that's what I hope I'm doing here. I hope this has been a resource for people who are trying to, get better at Dota filmmaking or, whatever, but anyway, yeah. In the meantime, I will probably participate next year. Maybe I will make Valve count to 3, maybe I will get 3 wins in a row. Who knows? And in the meantime, yeah, I am working on the System Shock remake by Night Dive Studios, so you might want to check that out if those words I just uttered, System Shock remake, sound appealing to you. you should definitely check it out. I mean, I think we're doing pretty cool stuff. But other than that, I'm trying to get a project out of the door. Dota related is gonna be a Dota video. And I've been wanting to do it since TI5, and hopefully, I will get that done before TI7. So yeah. Anyway, once again, thank you so much for your support, people. I really appreciate it, and please try to be a positive force in the community and try to support people. Be as kind as you can, and you know, keep kicking ass in a way. Keep kicking ass in all the ways you know how to. And I bid you farewell until next time.